All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome into today's edition of In the Game. I am your host, Hustle, and as always, we'll be diving into the NFT gaming landscape today as I'm joined by MotoGP Ignition, Animoca Brands, Rev Motorsport, the entire ecosystem underneath this umbrella, and I'm super stoked to get into MotoGP Ignition with Mitch Sayer from the studio itself, and then Animoca Brands, Sean from Animoca Brands. That is going to be an awesome show today, direct from the project. Without further ado, let's get in the game.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
If you ain't here to hustle, why is you here? But if you here to hustle, the moon is near. It's crypto Banter, not financial advice. If you don't listen, what's the cost, what's the price? This ain't a game, put you on game. I know you don't play, but ain't a percent. If you ain't here to hustle, why is you here? But if you here to hustle, the moon is near. It's crypto Banter, not financial advice. If you don't listen, what's the cost, what's the price? This ain't a game, put you on game. I know you don't play, but ain't a play. If you get lost, show you the way.
All right, let's dive right into it. Be sure to drop down and hit the like button if you enjoy the show. And if you are bullish on MotoGP Ignition, as well as subscribe to the channel for daily videos here every single day on Crypto Banter. And be sure to remember, this is a sponsored video by Animoca Brands, the biggest Web3 gaming company in the world. And I am very happy to be joined by Mitch Sayer from Blowfish Studio, producer over at Blowfish Studio, and Sean Dudley, the VP of product over at Animoca Brands. Guys, how are y'all today?
Not too bad, Hustle. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Very well. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, this will be a good one. I'll just kind of give you guys the floor to start off. Whoever wants to go first. If you want to just introduce yourself, maybe your background in gaming and how it brought you into Web3 gaming, and then your positions with Blowfish and Animoca.
I'll let Sean take the stage first.
All right. So yeah, I'm VP of product at Animoca. I've been in games 17 years, maybe something like that. So quite a while. Been with Animoca since it was founded. Was with the parent company prior to that. So been around that kind of business for the last 10, 11 years. And what I do kind of at the company at Animoca is basically to remember that what we're trying to build is for people, right? I think that's kind of a way to sum it up. Product is a bit of a new term, like newish, let's say last 5 years it's come about. But yeah, it's taking that original kind of creative producer that has always existed in and around games and just kind of, gave it a little bit of a readjustment. And essentially what I do is I help Animoca's subsidies, Animoca's portfolio companies, people who we cooperate and coordinate with and we want to kind of partner with and try and help them and work with them as they kind of want to approach Web3. And then I'm very, very kind of hands deep into what we do with Rev Motorsport and also with what we do with MotoGP Ignition. So
amazing. Mitch?
Yeah, so I'm Mitch. I'm the producer from Blowfish Studios, who is directly managing both the MotoGP Ignition titles, Champions and Manager, which obviously we'll go into a little bit later on. But I come from a game design background before joining Blowfish with a smaller studio called Epiphany Games. But this is my first experience joining a Web3 induced company. So really what my role is working on this project is ensuring that not only myself, but as well as the team come together and we create an experience, at least for MotoGP, something that the diehard fans and newcomers can really come to really jump into this space for the first time or as a returning guest and actually see what MotoGP has to offer. Yeah, that's really me.
That's awesome. And speaking of what MotoGP has to offer, if you guys want to take the floor as well and kind of give someone who might not be familiar with the project, with the game itself, what is MotoGP Ignition for someone who might be new?
So Unless Sean, you want to go
No,
on
you
this?
take it
I'll
away.
take it.
Take it away.
Alrighty.
Yeah, go for it.
So, MotoGP Ignition is really the home for where users can go to the marketplace and find a broad collection of cards ranging from riders, bikes, manufacturers, and hotshots, in which they can utilize these cards into the most current game, MotoGP Ignition Champions. MotoGP Ignition Champions is essentially a team builder where you would utilize these cards that you would get from the marketplace, and you would build your fantasy team. At the moment, we're currently supporting the 2020 season and the 2021 season, so you can nick and grab whoever you want from either of those seasons, muck them together, put in a bike as well, and throw them into an event that happens on a weekly basis from Friday to Sunday every week. And you go into the running to potentially win up to, I believe, 3,000 rev, but it's essentially a prize pool of 50,000 rev every week.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so MotoGP Ignition sits as part of our larger MotoGP offering. We recently brought in another title called MotoGP Champions Quest, which is a mobile racing title. But we have plans going forwards to really build out a very comprehensive MotoGP offering within Web3. And that vertical of MotoGP sits within our REVV Motorsport platform, which is where all of our kind of racing, driving, competitive motorsport titles all kind of nuzzle together, and it's about fans, it's about collectors, it's about driving, competing, and MotoGP is the branded experience within that, alongside a couple of others, but that one is a major one for us.
Yeah, for sure. And so the 2020 and 2021 seasons are supported, and just for people out there, this is officially licensed, right? The IP within the game is all officially licensed.
Yeah, 100%. So we are incredibly lucky to have a really great relationship that we're building with MotoGP and the Dorna Group. We have MotoGP plus Moto2 and Moto3. So we don't just have the top tier of the sport, we have the kind of the prep entry tiers as well. But yeah, it's fully officially licensed.
That's awesome. And then as far as the way that the ecosystem works, being a lot of games, you have to buy an NFT, you need to it's free to play. How can someone that's new to the ecosystem get involved with MotoGP? What would be the process, the economics? Would they need an asset? Is it free to play? How would a new user onboard to the game?
The current mode is an asset, right? So you come in, you have hot shots or cars that you can purchase. You can buy them on the marketplace today with REV, and then we do sales of them where we support both credit card and REV purchases. And you need a handful of cards. I think we allow you to play with just one. And that's it. And then you can play champions at no extra fee. And basically you're playing every week for a reward pool of REV. Okay,
got it. And explain, and a lot of people should be familiar with the REV token. I feel like it's like been the core pillar of every racing, category or game underneath Animoca's portfolio for a long time. For someone who might not be familiar with the way that the REV token works inside the ecosystem, can you give an overview of the REV token?
For sure. So REV has been around the token's been around for around 2 years, and 2 years of utility with that too, and 2 years of earning with that as well. But essentially the way that we position REV within the ecosystem right now is that it's the core token that you would need to have if you want to acquire assets from within the ecosystem that we are directly selling and issuing, right? That Animoca is issuing through its kind of like primary titles. And REV is also used as the token of winning right now, right? We've previously done it and used it as the token of earning. We're making some changes to the ecosystem because we want to ensure that those who have REV, and when you get REV and kind of like the value of REV, we want it to kind of have a reliable and kind of sturdy position within the ecosystem. So we're going to kind of change its reward structure a little bit. But essentially, if you're winning, you're still getting REV. And if you want to acquire the assets to get into the ecosystem, you'd be spending REV.
Okay, got it. No, and I love the way you termed it too, because a lot of games that stuck with one token as their earnings metric over time, the generation one crypto games, their economics really had a lot of flaws down the line. So it's good that you guys have maneuvered along the way, kind of made some tweaks with the Rev token, the way that the earnings are distributed, and that you'll have a game plan for that going forward. Because obviously economics weigh heavily into the success of a game, regardless of product in Web3.
Oh, massively so. And I think the thing is that everyone who's in the space right now, right, we just have to be incredibly aware of all these economic models shifting and changing, because the fact is that the majority of games right now are like bringing in audiences relative to kind of more traditional games that are incredibly small. But the thing is, like, we're building out and planning economies for when we get, you know, 500,000 daily active users and 5 million monthly active users. That is kind of the target that we want to be pushing for this, where we do want to go like true mass market, and balancing the economy for like a fraction of that as we have right now is very different from when it's this much larger audience.
Yeah.
So we're going to change things as we go along, but like, you know, those who come in early and have been like, you know, backed us since the beginning, they've been able to kind of, you know, get their holds on REVV's rewards and stuff like that. So hopefully, like, you know, we're able to, people feel like they've been able to kind of get something for their play and their kind of support of us.
For sure. Yeah. And for a newcomer, they don't want to have to worry about economics over their head. Right. So I think it's brilliant. What's the gameplay loop like? So someone hops into the game, gets a pack, or gets some of the cards. What can they expect? How does the gameplay loop play out?
So I guess essentially when we talk about champions to begin with, it's more like the entry starter before really they have the option to jump into manager, right? So just to explain champions at a brief level, it is you get those cards from the marketplace, you jump into champions, and you select your rider, select your bike, or manufacturer, and you save your team. And then when Friday comes along at the end of the week, that's when the first event starts. And these events you currently don't interact with. So these races will run over the weekend. And then come Sunday, it will be the last race of that event. And then on that event, you get to see where you placed on a leaderboard. In future iterations that we're going to be looking at, we will be looking at more individual seasons that a player can actually choose which one they want to be running in, just because right now it's mixing in both seasons. But later on, we're looking at introducing a 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, etc. But Champions is a very small game loop. It's just very much you get in, have your cards, build your team, save it, and see where you end up. With Manager, how that's coming along around the corner, it's similar in a way, but it's more detailed and a bit more in-depth to provide that more managerial experience. So with Manager, you use the same cards that you can find on the marketplace. So within Champions and Manager, they use the same system.
Okay.
But you would be investing Rev into tickets in which you can enter in into an event, which would be the Grand Prix, which would be your main event that you're looking to earn both Rev and SHRD, which no doubt Sean would be more than happy to talk about SHRD and how that plays into more of the ecosystem. But essentially, we're still looking at when Grand Prix will take place. But for right now, you would be taking place in either 2 practice races on one day, you would go into the following 2 qualifiers the next day, and then you would have the final race on the next day. So essentially, it takes the same kind of schedule as that Champion does on the weekend. But we're still looking into that, and obviously, come iterations, we'll see what makes really the player base more comfortable with that. But as well, it gives players also the option of going into a more casual experience, going up against AIs in other events like time trials. So with these time trials, it also allows them to access via SHRD, and you would be collating a team, I believe for some, it's a max of 2 riders, 1 bike, a manufacturer, and a hot shot or a wild card is what we're calling it in game. And you would essentially put them in, and you get to watch this the race run live, whilst actually making more strategic options in the game to see if You know, if you want your rider to perform in a more balanced way or in a more aggressive style, you can, and that will ultimately give that idea. If they want to be more aggressive on the field and take more risks to cut those couple of seconds within the race, they could go up and potentially earn more from that race at the end.
Okay.
So,
Makes sense. Yeah, and we'll talk about the economics that you just mentioned in just a second. I'm curious. So with the cards being 2020 and 2021, for example, do they factor in stats from those seasons, or how do the stats for each card play in? So I'm assuming if it's a driver, if it's a bike, for example, it's playing into the stats that it had that season, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. And then what was this new economic? What was this intriguing economic idea?
So, yeah, that's the SHRD token, right?
Okay.
So that's the new asset. So the way that we're looking at the Rev Motorsport titles at the moment is that there are 3 tiers of asset, fungible asset, right? So there's the Rev token, which is the token of purchase, like the core value proposition token, let's say, in some ways. And then we have the SHRD token, which is kind of the perpetual earner, right? So it's infinite, and it's burnt on spend, burnt on use, right? So you're not necessarily, using it in the same way as you would Rev. But what the SHRD token does is that because it is infinitely created, we're allowed to reward in a predictable manner, because we're not looking to cap that supply, let's say in the amount that you can earn, but we do cap the supply in the amount that circulates, right? So we're very cautious in ensuring that we don't flood the market with an asset when the user base isn't there and the pressure to use it isn't there either, right? So we're going to do a slow kind of easing out of that. And like Rev, SHRD is also multi-chain, multi-project, right? So as of today, Rev is already on 4 different blockchains: Ethereum, Polygon, BSC, and Flow. And SHRD will follow that, right? And what we want people to do is same with Rev, where you get your Rev from Ignition, you take it over to high voltage, the Formula E title that we have, or you take it over to Rev Racing, or in the future, you'll take it over to Torque Drift 2. And likewise with the SHRD, it's like, okay, I'm going to earn my SHRD in Torque Drift, but I want to go and spend it in Ignition. And we want that free transfer of asset and kind of like that ability to feel like you can always kind of dive into one or the other and have a little bit of a starting point if you have played another title. But there is also, there's a lot to balance with that, right? Where essentially you could be flooding one market, and then due to the way that the token is utilized in that title, the content can then be dramatically affected, because they're all going to be like, okay, use this token, this SHRD, to increase the value of certain content and NFTs. So that's where we issue the kind of intermediate token. So in MotoGP Ignition, that's Dino. In the Rev Racing title, that's Catalyst. And the idea is that there's this intermediary token that just is a gap between the content progression system and the earning system. So it allows the games themselves in the short term to have a little bit more control before we kind of blow it all out. Because at some point we just want to say, hey, these are now all your tokens, and these are now your all kind of mature ecosystems, and go at it. But rather than kind of do that right now, we're just going to have that other intermediate layer of control that lets us take step by step, learn a little bit, control emission here and there.
Got it. That makes sense. I absolutely love it, and it's empowering. Like you said, you're giving at the end of the day, you're actually giving a toolkit to those ecosystems and those games to be able to have those tokens inside of their ecosystem. So I love it. And we have a question in the chat, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's is there some sort of iteration of the game that's playable right now? But I have a question in the chat. When beta?
So the idea is to have a beta for Manager next year in January.
Okay, got it. And what has been the how long has this been in development, if I might ask?
So I believe oh man, my dates are coming off rusty.
Also, time just flies in this space. Every day is like a week.
I tell you what, by the span of this time last year, I thought that it would have been about March, and it just flew like that. Anyway, besides the point. I believe we left pre-production back in March, so okay. I think we're at 7 or 8 months. Does that sound right, Sean?
That's about right. That's about right.
Okay.
Ignition itself has been in development for like,
For a good while.
you know, yeah, like around 2 years or so, right? A little bit longer than that, because we built Ignition on Flow, and on Flow, when we started building, there was no decentralized marketplace, so we had to build that. There was no fungible token standard, so we also had to build that. So like the first year, it was kind of, okay, let's build out all the tools that we're going to need, the suite of kind of features that you would expect from a blockchain title, marketplace, fungible, transferability, utility, and lay that foundation. And then as that started to kind of get laid down, then we're, as well as kind of defining certain NFT standards when we first kicked it off as well. So now we have a lot of that groundwork laid out. Now then the game started to really kind of kick off and get been in full production for the last kind of 6 to 7 months or so.
That's fantastic. And I think a couple things, and guys in the chat box, if you want to ask more questions, go ahead and drop your comments. We have, a few minutes left in the show. If you have any questions, for either of our guests today, please drop them in the comments and we'll get to those. I'll propose those. You can try to pry some alpha out of them if you'd like. Drop some comments in the comment box and we'll answer some questions. But I did have a couple questions. As far as mass adoption goes, I think the IP official licensing is actually huge. And in the fact of, we're seeing the NFL with DraftKings do something. We're seeing NBA with So Rare do something. What have you guys seen with the power of the IP? I'm assuming inside of Discord chats and stuff like that, there had to have been some MotoGP, like just actual fans coming in potentially into the ecosystem. They heard from it from outside, etc. Have you seen any of that traction from like the sport itself and maybe not Web3 gaming?
Oh, for sure. And I think it's kind of, there's another thing that we've seen happen as well, where you see like lapsed MotoGP fans kind of discover this and then say, oh, I'm watching the races again, right? We've seen that kind of happen. But that's ultimately the whole idea why you use an established IP anyway, is because there's an existing audience there.
Yep.
And we definitely tap into it and want to continue to tap into it. And right now, MotoGP has had, one of the fastest growing motorsport audiences over kind of the last kind of five years or so. It's huge. It's super exciting. But like we've barely started to really tap into that audience in the way that we expect that we're going to be able to.
It's so early,
6 to 12 months, right? So the proposition changes a lot, but we've laid a lot of those. We've brought in some of those players, some of those fans and stuff, and that's one of the reasons why Champions is there, because it's like, oh, this is like they can look at it and say, oh, this is a fantasy sport. I get that, right? I understand what that is. So we're not asking them to leap too far, and then we'll kind of always keep that there so they have like a recognizable entry point.
Awesome. And then what devices will this be compatible on? Will it be mobile too, or is that in the plan?
So at least for Champions as well. So Champions, it's coming to mobile as of next week. Well, actually, no, it's this week now, right? Yep. Should be this week
awesome.
now. But as well, managers should be coming to mobile as well. But because of some technical discoveries along the way with Champions, we have found that there's a little bit more work that's required that would be needed for managers. So we're still looking into how we want to optimize and obviously get the full, experience that people are going to get from the desktop version of Manager into Manager and provide that same feeling. Because one of the things that we learned, both Sean and myself, having attended one of the MotoGP races the other day, it was the actual experience of being there through the speed, the sound, the actual visual of standing there in person is so much different from watching it, from TV. So instantly, as soon as both of us sat down at the table, we looked at each other and, we came up with 20, 30 ideas that we had to add into Manager. So long story short, we need to figure out how we want to start optimizing all these new features that we want to, expand the mobile experience onto Manager for the time being. But yes, it will be coming to mobile.
Got it. And then how will this compare to MotoGP games, to the current MotoGP games? This is from Joshua in the chat.
Well, it's a new offering, right? So I think there's Milestone do this great kind of console title every year. They've been putting it out kind of annually. They know what they're doing. They have this really great groove in what they're putting out there. And then the other mobile official title we recently acquired, right? So now that's part of this expanded group. But there's no official manager title out there, right? So this is filling that space. This is what we're going to do here, is fill that space.
Fantastic. And then from Chaos in the chat, what is the 5-year plan? Obviously, long-term industry here, but what's the long-term plan with the ecosystem?
So we're in, as Animoca, right? One of the things that we've yet to pull the trigger on fully is the fact that we have like a massive range of titles. Within Rev Motorsport, we already have a large collection there too, but essentially what we want to do year upon year is greater integration of the interoperability of this, right? So not only the fungible side of it, where you can take that, spend it, and do what you like to do, but it's also kind of far greater interoperability of the NFTs, right? And that goes beyond just purely what we want to do with MotoGP Ignition, whether it be the mobile game, the manager game Champions, or mobile Champions Quest, which is the racing game. But it's also, what do we do with MotoGP in the sandbox? What do we do with MotoGP in Phantom Galaxy, right? When we have these other titles, and it's kind of wanting to make sure that there is this through line. And sometimes it's not going to be a massively deep through line. Sometimes there's going to be kind of almost Easter egg like approach. But the idea is that they all interconnect more and more as we go along. And it's changing the way that we build games, because we have to kind of, this should not be an afterthought. It should be a state of it, like, when we kick off a title, it's like, okay, this is the points of integration across the ecosystem. So that's what it's mostly going to be, is you'll see all these titles start to merge and connect much, much more.
Awesome. And Chaos, and in response, said, great outlook. And then Joshua again says, when mobile inevitably becomes available, how will it handle cross-compatibility, or would it be platform to platform? So I think what they mean, would mobile be playing against PC, or will it be cross-platform like we see traditional games now, or will it be strictly mobile to mobile, PC to PC, etc.?
Cross-platform. I think there shouldn't be any reason for it to be in this case, because there's no like skill kind of
difference in the devices.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's not like an input changes it so much in a way that you can't play it, right? Yeah. And also, it's kind of like when we release, we have to be realistic about user bases, right? And we don't want to segregate user bases when they're in a stage of growth. So we want them to be able to play together.
Makes complete sense. That makes complete sense, guys. No more questions right now. So I just wanted to ask a general question. I love asking the guests that come on the show. We're almost 30 minutes in, so we're about to wrap it up here shortly. But I wanted to ask each of you, what's your long-term take on the NFT gaming industry? Obviously, you're participating and working inside the industry. Where do you guys see this industry actually adopting to? I've heard people say it's going to overtake gaming, traditional microtransactions. I've heard people say it's only going to be a segment of the gaming market forever. What do you guys think as far as the adoption of this industry and how powerful NFT gaming is going to be in the future?
You want to go, Mitch? Give your point first.
Sure. I stand on the fence that obviously maybe on the 50-50 scale where it will be a segment. But that's not to say that I really don't see a world in the next 5 to 10 years at least not contributing to 50 or 75, because obviously we can't tell that far. But I don't really see a world that any game doesn't have an NFT kind of integrated in it, any shape or form. I think it, one way or another, the market itself, and with the growing consumer base, with the knowledge that it's slowly learning, and we're seeing it quickly from all the numbers that people are investing in the Web3 space, it's bound to happen that NFTs will be a separate segment of the gaming market. Traditional games will be there with some of the people that don't support it, but I think it will inevitably be a different segment.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are similar because I mean, all we need to do is look at the fact that when mobile games started, everyone was like, "Oh, now everything's going to be a mobile game." It wasn't, but instead, mobile became this massive. It became the de facto like leader within gaming and playing, right?
Right.
And same with live service. It was a case of, oh, it's gonna kind of, every game is going to be live service, and no, it isn't, right? And I think arguably with these two kind of paradigms that have kind of been introduced, and Web3 being this new paradigm, we've just had a far more richer kind of creative space for games overall. But I think where the NFT side of this is really going to kind of come into play is even though not every game is necessarily going to be like NFT enabled, blockchain enabled, those games that are going to be far more than just games, right?
Absolutely.
They're going to become these platform experiences. So that kind of like in the games, it may be this single run, but when you look at that game segment and beyond, it becomes a whole ecosystem of collectibles and brand identity and social spaces and a whole bunch of other kind of movements and empowerments that the idea of decentralization and blockchain is going to bring through, right? Because we've already seen brands, they're ready for this, right? And people are ready for this. Games is going to be one factor of that, but ultimately it's anything that it connects to runs like continually like towards this horizon of whatever it can end up being, right?
Yeah, for sure. I completely echo the sentiment. I think that it's inevitable. I think that within the next 5 years, conservatively, I think we'll see games like Fortnite doing NFT packs. I'm not saying NFTs as their whole thing, but I would 100% assume that these games will sell an NFT skin. There is no way that these games don't, because there's no, like, if it doesn't work, they can just go back to their old revenue generating microtransaction model, which is just one way. But I think that the sentiment they would see from, first of all, the NFT community, but then the people who start to understand, oh, wait, I actually own this skin. And if it's rare, I can actually trade it. I just think it's going to be so empowering. And I would be willing to make a stance that Fortnite rolls out an NFT skin pack within the next few years. And if that happens, obviously, as we just mentioned, there's so many companies right now already building. I could totally see it in the future.
Yeah.
Well, all right, gentlemen, I really appreciate the time. I believe, I think it's late where you guys are. It's early where I am. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to join and go through the ecosystem. Is there anything you wanted to leave off, before we sign off?
Go to animocabrands.com and see all the stuff that we're doing. It would take an age to run through everything, but certainly like we have so much stuff that we're building, a bunch of incredibly creative and talented people, massively enthusiastic about what Web3 and blockchain is, building this stuff. We want to hear from people who want to create with us. We want to hear from people who have ideas. We wish to collaborate further. That's kind of been one of our core kind of ideologies of when we entered this space is continued collaboration, for sure. So definitely check out Animoca Brands at the top, because we're building so much stuff. And then of course, MotoGP Ignition, which is MotoGP-ignition.com. Head over to there. There's details there about how you can get Rev onto Flow, how you can start purchasing cards. And if you get yourself ready, you can start playing MotoGP Champions next Friday for that event where 50,000 Rev is going to be up for grabs.
Amazing. And then Mitch, anything you wanted to leave off with?
Just to double up on, go check out MotoGP Champions. If you are interested in checking out the MotoGP space and what the marketplace does have to offer, it's the place to be. Perfect. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time as always. If you liked the video, be sure to drop down and hit the like button if you're bullish on MotoGP Ignition, everything that Animoca Brands, Rev Motorsport, the entire ecosystem. I think it's fantastic. Subscribe down below for daily shows here on Crypto Banter every single day. I'll be back on Monday with another show. As always, play well, my friends.
Mm-hmm.